Way! The Teams is back with the OG cast after a week sabbatical. And Mr. Leg Dog had the week before. We are reunited after 2 weeks apart for life getting in the way. As usual, I'm Pommy and Oz. I haven't changed in the last couple of weeks. And I've got the legend that is your friend and mine, the great man himself, Leg Dog. How are we diddling, Leg Dog?
Very well, mate. Very well. It's the best time of the week. I'm glad to have you back. I love Terry with all of my heart, but he let his positivity get to me. I got excited and I got hurt again. I'm ready for pure numbers, pure statistical evidence this week, and I'm ready to throw a few punches if I need to, Pom, because I'm fiery, I'm upset, and we've got a big Friday night game. And historically, in my memory, every time we go to Sydney to play, we get absolutely murdered. So I'm looking forward to us bucking the trend tomorrow night.
Mate, we do love us. We do love getting our hopes up, only to be let down. It is the thing, isn't it? It's the theory that, it's the hope that kills you. It's not so much the team, it's the belief system from within. But obviously, we've got a big game against Sydney. Let's just slightly, as chat flitter in, I can see some icons in chat as well. We've got the gorgeous Carls. We've got Big Andrews in chat. Christian. Jarmaine, yeah. Terry, to be fair, though, over the last couple of weeks, it's been me building Terry up. So maybe indirectly, I'm to blame for Let Dog's false positive last week. But obviously, as you say, we've got this game this week, right? And it's a tough one, isn't it? Because let's be honest, let's not escape the elephant in the room. The last couple of weeks have been, for a want of a better word, dog shit, haven't they? Right? Let's be honest. I'm not going to beat around the bush and get you excited, but what has everyone in chat and Let Dog, what has been the big takeout for you in the last 4 weeks? If you had the ability to change something, what would you change? And don't be cheating and say I'd win. Like,
no, that's
practical.
obviously cheating. That's obviously cheating. What would I change? There's so many things I would change, Pom. Last week we talked about our inability to move the ball up the ground, having to rely on our key forwards to go and take relieving marks and have no one to kick it to. We got a lot of midfielders who are finding a lot of the ball, and their first instinct, and Terry touched on this last week as well in regards to Wiedering, is to turn around and go backwards every single time. We seem to make decisions slowly, and the decisions we make always seem to be defensive decisions. Whereas I want us to play, at least if we're going to lose in an attacking brand of football, I'm going to at least have fun for periods of the game. At the moment, we're losing, and it's just like you can kick 10 goals and you can beat us. And if you kick 10 goals and you can beat us, then that's boring for me as a fan. But it's boring and we're not winning. So give me some excitement. Give me something to live for.
Well, I mean, there's some great ones as well. Avenue to goal, which you've discussed. This is a big one for me, getting the basics, because at the moment, I feel like our boys would struggle to complete a Sudoku if you only remove the number 9. Do you know what I mean? I reckon
Sudokus can be pretty difficult. I'll say this, Paul, because we talked during the week a fair bit, and we discussed this, but a lot of people have been talking about Vossi, and that's fair enough, whatever, but it's not his fault. Our players can't hit a 20-meter pass to each other, which is never ending. They do not hit each other with a kick, which is the most basic thing a footballer can do.
I've got to say, as my pop used to say, when we used to play up front, if you were having a bad day, you'd struggle to hit a cow's ass with a banjo. Was his catchphrase. I mean, for me, like for me, from an analytical sense of the word, you look at Carlton, they aren't bad, right? The problem is they are distinctly average. Distinctly average. And I think the big thing for me when I watch these boys is I always look back to Stephen May did a wonderful on-ground interview when they won the flag. And it was their first game after being flag winners, and they'd kind of come out of nowhere and won that game. And he said that there was a real belief within the system, and that their system now, as much as they tried to fight it, had become their safety blanket. And what had changed from when they missed finals to winning the flag was now that all the guys in the group believed if they just followed the system, they were always going to be in and around and with a chance. And I think if you asked our boys, do you trust the system? I think a lot of them would scream, run to the changing rooms and call Ma, to be honest. And that's the big thing for me. Cohesion, the basic philosophies of the system, it's poor. And you know what? This is the first time I've come to teams, and I think, and I'm going to put this out there, I've been thinking long and hard about it. If I was the coach this week, I'd be demanding that we go forward with the players that I'm going to keep next year. So I'd be looking at players like Kemp instead of Mitch McGovern. That high half forward is a big fucking issue. So that needs to be fixed. So if that's TDK in for JSOS, because God love JSOS, but JSOS strikes me as that kind of player that, if we're honest about JSOS, he's a 5 out of 10 everywhere. Do you know what I mean? And I think in today's game, you need to be a 7 out of 10 at least somewhere. So if it's not TDK, let's see what he's about. Do you know what I mean? Because the worst case, and this is the one that's killing me, and chat, I went back and watched Sydney last year and a few of the games. And one thing that screamed to me that I didn't think about until I started doing some data for this week's videos was the big takeout of difference was Harry and Charlie in the last 2 games have been caught on the wing as that exit ball. And I went back and watched last year, and the ball was quite simple. It went, Sardock took the kick out, right? Kicked it out, got the rebound 50, and then that would go to TDK, right? And then the next kick after that was Harry, with the next kick being Kerno, or Kerno taking the mark and Harry. And that's been a huge change because Carlton tried it in round 2 with JSOS, and JSOS took 0 marks. And since then, they've brought Harry and Charlie, and invariably they're working the same flank. That really kills Carlton's ability to transition.
Yeah, and we touched on this last week with Terry as well. They're doing that role really well, them being Charlie and Harry. They're nailing that role, but them nailing that role means they can't turn around and kick it to themselves, which is probably the biggest weakness in the plan, because we're kicking out to Matt Owies as a leading forward, bring back Michael Gibbons, play him at full forward if we're going to do that. Like, I'm with you that they're doing their role. They've just got no one to kick to. And yes, we've tried TDK there before to do it. I think he's very good at taking those marks down the ground. Not so much in front of goal, but down the ground. JSOS, we want him to be that player, but he struggles with it. He does provide stuff at ground ball, but that's not what that role's demanding in the current game style. I'm not sure who else you can even ask to do it. Like maybe Pitto, but that's not really his game style. Mitch McGovern's going to be too deep in defense to be there to take that mark. So we're really, really limited with what we can do. And obviously guys like Jack Martin and that aren't fit. So, or are always not fit. So it's a struggle. It is a real weakness, and it all stems to not really having a high half forward that can actually impact the game.
Mate, I agree with you. And 2 stats that I wanted to point out that you've just thrown into chat. So the first one, goal scorers. It's a really interesting one, this, because I agree here that midfield need to get involved. Carlton's midfield at the moment devoid of goals, where bottom 2 for a weird stat of forward and midfielders crossing the forward threshold. And Carlton at the moment have individual goal scorers this year. We're tied with the least. I mean, one ahead of the least, Brisbane, in the comp, right? Which is interesting because Collingwood have the same amount of us as 20. But what is really interesting is Carlton have an average of 6 goal scorers per game where the other teams that are close to us have a massive flux throughout the game. So Collingwood, just to put that in perspective, have the same amount of goal scorers on their books this year as us, 20, but they've averaged 8 different goal scorers a game versus Carlton at 6.2. Now, that is, I think, a big, big, big worry. And the other stat I want to point out, this is a big fallacy for Carlton. So your disposal efficiencies at Carlton, it's really interesting, this. Carlton are ranked, right? I'm on Champ Starter's website now. Carlton aren't ranked as bad as you think. So kicking efficiency, Carlton are ranked as the 7th best side in the comp, right? Handball efficiency with a number 1 side in the comp, which is interesting. And then if you go to our disposal efficiency, Carlton are ranked 6th, which is really interesting. But it's funny, you see the big flux of Carlton is uncontested disposal efficiency is the only stat in disposals where we're below average. Let that sink in. Uncontested. So unpressured disposals is the only stat that we measure with disposals below the AFL average.
I've got some source on that, but I want to touch on the goal kicking one first, Pom, because I was just pulling up the numbers in front of me. If you go back through, we've always had an issue with that third goal scorer. Go back to 2017, Levi Casbolt and Matthew Wright kicked 34 and 30 goals, and then Charlie Curnow with 20 was our next best goal kicker. You jump forward to 2018, next best goal kicker. We had Charlie Curnow 34, then Matt Wright and Harry Mackay at 20 plus each. So we only had one player kick 30 goals or more. 2019 had no goals kick 30 and only 2 players kick 20, Mitch McGovern and Harry Mackay. 2020 shortened season, only Harry Mackay kicked 20 goals or more. No one else kicked 20 goals or more. Then even move forward to 2021 when Harry kicked 58. Next best was Eddie Betts with 27. Third best goal scorer, didn't kick 20 goals. Last year, we had Paddy Cripps score 20 goals as our third best goal kicker. So since 2017, we've had 3 years where our third best goal kicker has actually kicked 20 goals or more. Been a big issue for a long time. At least Paddy Cripps last year, when we threw him forward, he impacted. He did kick goals. It seems like now would be a time where you could try that, given the amount of players we have who can fulfill that role within the midfield. But then we're facing the issue again with who's our third best goal kicker. Well, we've got Charlie Curnow this year on 36, Harry Mackay on 14, and then it's Matt Owies on 11 and Corey Durden on 10. And you're right, there's not a midfielder in sight. Our best goal kicking midfielder is Adam Cherry this year with 3 goals. That's as many as Sam Doherty, and he kicks his from outside 60 metres, which is just ridiculous. It's a big issue. It's been a big issue for a long time, and it's one we've not been able to solve. So how do you think we can solve it in the meantime is the first question.
Well, it's interesting as well because, and I'd love to know what chat think, you're actually seeing Walsh, Kennedy and Cripps spend less and less time resting forward. So last year, you saw Walsh rest quite a bit high half forward. Cripps in the first 8 games spent almost 23% of his game time in the forward 50 as that resting third, right? And that has definitely dropped off. And I think what's important is, and why I think I do so well at my role, is you look nowadays, speaking to a few list managers in the AFL, their entire job now is analytical based. So I was chatting to a good mate of mine who's a list manager at a Melbourne club, very distinguished one, I might add. And they have 0 scouts now that use eyes. So everything has to be data verified, but it's how you read the data. So one thing that I think is really telling is that stat in itself, the midfield getting inside 50. And if you've got some time tonight, after you've watched the Pomming Odds show, I want you to go back and watch the first quarter from the second goal, and then watch the midfield in the first 5 minutes till the next 10 minutes. And watch the high half forwards, Motlop and Durden, particularly in the small pocket region, but watch the mids and watch what they do. Everything is defensive. They start to sit back. And I was chatting to a mate the other day, and he was saying it reminds him of when he coaches schools of who was shit, that they start to panic and get behind the ball to make their life easier and disregard the attacking thing. And if you watch Carlton, that has been there since Richmond, and Richmond were woeful when Carlton started doing that in the second. They started to use too many balls behind like we do. And it's really interesting, that observation. So go and watch that if you've got it. But I think the only way you fix it is these boys have got to be more bold. And I think Voss needs to throw Cripps forward, get them in the goals, because at the moment, you notice it. Walsh no longer runs into 50 and blazes at goal. He's now looking to give it off every time. And Walsh 2 years ago, when he got really high up in the Brownlow, that was when he used to run in and just have a go at the shot, have a shot.
Yeah.
And now he's not.
Would you, Pom, consider saying this off the back of the team stream on Pommy and Oz channel on Tuesday, knowing the answer? Would you consider, hey, Silvani hasn't worked as the forward yet. TDK hasn't worked as the forward yet. We're not using Cripps as the forward yet. Is it a realistic opportunity with some defenders getting healthier that you look at a Mitch McGovern as a third tall forward? I asterisk this with when he did play in the forward line in 2019, kicked 22 goals, 11, and had I don't know how many goal assists off the top of my head, but he had a bunch or a few. He was actually one of the most effective forwards we'd had in like 10 years, just statistically speaking. Obviously, didn't match the eye test. Is that a potential solution?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because to me, I don't know what chat think and you let dog. I look at it and I don't think Mitch McGovern's on the list next year.
No.
I really don't. And I think watching him down the back this year, he's been okay, but I'd like to see Carlton be bold and play Kemp and go, he's the future. He's re-signing fee. He's going to be half of what McGovern is. Because I think people are naive. When you're on that kind of money and people say, oh, but he'll take 200K because we gave him 600 for 4 years. No, you wouldn't.
He's going to take the market value and he's going to have a club who will pay him.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you look at it. Who's going to do that when you're at work?
No.
Do you know what I mean? If you're at work and your boss says to you, oh, well, my family haven't eaten for your salary, you going to 10% your salary? Don't think you are. You've got mouths to feed. So I think Kemp should be there. But I look at McGovern. And do you remember when he was at Adelaide? I found an article from old Richo, right? And this was 2017. And he was saying that Adelaide, Mitch McGovern needs to look at going elsewhere because he's banging in. He just banged in 32 goals. And from half a season, he banged in 20, saying that he's wasted as the third and should be a key elsewhere and look at the main goal scorer. I think that should be something that Carlton look at because I don't think he's going to stay there. I really don't. So I think for me now, I like him third tall. And if it doesn't help him, it doesn't help him, does it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I'd rather develop Kemp in a position where he's going to play, and teams are starting to filter through on Twitter, and it is a big one. And as you said, if we think there's a world where Mitch McGovern's not on the list next year, which I certainly think is a very real possibility, why are we wasting him in defence when we could be playing Kemp there? Let's see if he gives us more than what the other guys are giving us in the forward line. Let's have a crack. Let's have a look, because at least he has some pedigree a long time ago, but at least some pedigree of doing it.
Mate, spot on. And if anyone's got the link, just flick it to me because my AFL app is still saying pending.
It's just Mitch Cleary leaking it early, but I'm going to wait for the official post to come through because I'm traditionalist. In the meantime, Pom, you happy with Mark Pitnet staying on this list for another 4 years?
Depending on what the value is, you'll never know. But I mean, I think that at the end of the day, does that mean TDK's gone?
It probably feels like let's assume that it's a value contract because they all say that. I would say they're solidifying their depth there. I don't necessarily think they see him as the number one ruckman for 4 years, but they're solidifying their depth. I don't think it means TDK's gone. It's certainly makes it easier to make a decision on Tom De Koning because Pito's sorted out and you don't have to worry about him. And we have a ruckman. Now what do we do? But I don't think it means TDK's out.
Mate, I'm with you. And I mean, this week, I want to see the midfield step up because both of these sides are very similar in numbers. And the big one that kills me before we get the final teams, the one that kills me, the biggest stat, is Carlton are the third best side at getting their balls to the hand first in stoppage and clearances. Ranking bottom 4, though, from chances created from that avenue, which I think tells you everything you need to know about how our midfield is operating. But the team is in, right? And there's going to be some shocks here. Ed Curnow and Jack Silvani are remitted with Lewis Young. In comes Brodie Kemp and TDK. Sam Doherty, Jacob Wheatering and Nick Newman. Brodie Kemp, Mitch McGovern and Sard are your backline. Akers, Cripps and Ollens at your centre line. Kennedy, Mackay, TDK, Corey Durden, Curnow and Motlock, your forwards. Your followers, Pitternet, Hewitt, Walsh. And the interchange, Boydie, Chera, Cottrell, and Owies.
Yeah, so interesting stuff. Worth noting as well, George Hewitt stays in the side. So it's essentially Tom De Koning for Jack Silvani, Brodie Kemp for Lewis Young, George Hewitt for Ed Curnow. One of Ed Curnow, Lockie Fogarty, Jack Silvani, and Lewis Young will be the sub. History would say that sub is going to be Ed Curnow, though it would make more sense to me for it to be a Fogarty type, but we've said that every week. Mitch McGovern's 50th Carlton game. So there's something to celebrate there. Pom, I am not surprised. I think some people will be surprised that Lewis Young's come out of the side and it's not a Jacob Wiedering type. I don't think they're going to drop a Jacob Wiedering. And I think just put him on, we've talked about this off air, Pom, just put him on, well, to be fair, the tall stocks at Sydney at both ends at the moment are pretty weak, but just put him on their biggest, most dangerous tall forward and just say, your only job today, Jacob, is to just stop this bloke. Just stop him. And Kempy and Garv are going to worry about the rest.
Hey, I agree with you. And I'd love to know Chat's opinion. I know Lek Dogs because we talk about this off camera, but I think there's a real evidence formulating that when Jones left, because Jones was genuinely that more intercept, clear the ball first, set Carlton up from the back half, where Wheatering was more the, you know what, I'll take the toughest guy, you and me, and you get rid of the ball for me. I think now Wheatering's had to slip into that role himself. I think he's really struggling. So I kind of like looking at this team at the moment on paper and going, okay, you've got two very aggressive defenders in Mr. McGovern and Mr. Kemp. I love it that now we're going to just see him go old school lockdown.
Yeah. Sydney's side of things, in comes Lewis Melican, so they must be struggling for depth. If Melican's coming in, Sam Wicks, Tom Hickey, out goes Sheldrick, who was the sub, probably going to be the sub again. Dylan Stevens, Peter Laddams, and Will Gould. So they get Tom Hickey's a solid inclusion. Wicks kind of dangerous small forward on his day, and Melican's just another depth defender. They line up Melican, Blakey, Fox in full back line, Florent, Lloyd, Cunningham, half back line, Warner, Parker, McInerney in the centre line, Ryan Clark. So he's probably, they might look at using Ryan Clark on an Adam Sard or a Sam Doherty to slow them down if they think they're dangerous enough, because he's pretty much exclusively a tagger these days. Hayden McLean, Will Hayward in the half forward line, Papley, Franklin, Heaney, dangerous on paper, full forward line. Lachlan McAndrew in the number one ruck spot. He's a bit inexperienced, but with Hickey in the side, he'll help. Errol Goulden, James Rowbottom, and on the interchange, Francis as a tall, Campbell, Hickey, and Wicks. That's their lineup.
It's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, I don't hate that team. I think, to be honest, he needs to get that connection at high half forward. Kind of surprised he's backed in his inside mids, but then from his press conference today, I'm not surprised. And that's going to be interesting because that connection, particularly from 55 out from goal to 55 out from the other goal, needs to be refined. And if that's TDK, if that's whoever it is, someone's got to step up this week. And I actually like it. I actually like it because, you know me, I'm not the kind of guy that gets excited by players playing with heart. Heart doesn't win you flags. Do you know what I mean? Skill does.
Are you surprised at all about Lewis Young being the one who gets omitted?
Not really, no. And I'll tell you for why, right? I'll tell you for why I'm not shocked. Because I think I look at the back line, and Voss last week criticised the defence and people have gone on it. But when you look at Carlton, 75% of inside 50s against become rebound 50s for Carlton. That's one of the highest in the league. But Carlton's scores from D50 are appalling, and they started off really well. I think we need more run. Sard now has stopped pretty much running out of D50. A lot of players have stopped running out of 50 or trying to take it. McGovern and Kemp there, for me, get me a little bit excited because both of them at least are direct. So let's see if it works. Because something needs to be done about a little bit of injection. Because I thought the fourth quarter, Carlton, when they had some really shit entries inside 50 and they were outpaced. Carlton were so slow.
It feels like they're taking an opportunity because Sydney they're struggling quite a bit in their tall department at the moment, down backing up forward. Feels like this week they're trying to take that as an opportunity to, as you pointed out, use Gov and Kemp as the pace this week, because Sardi and Doc, while we know they're going to get plenty of the ball, they're actually got some really tough matchups this week. So it feels like Vossi's going, no, let's use Kemp and Gov and let's just use them to put some pace on the ball, move it up, move it quickly, move it long, rather than trying to run it, which is going to be interesting. And I think we're going to see a bit more of a defensive game from Doc, Sard, and Newman, because it's the smalls that are going to be dangerous for Sydney tomorrow night, not necessarily the talls. Now, watch Buddy Franklin kick bloody 13 goals now that I've said that. But I think theoretically, on paper, the tough matchups are the smalls, and we're going to use Kemp and Gov as the relievers. Ollie Holland stays in the side. I'm happy with that. I do think he probably needs a rest at some point. Was subbed out last week. Clearly, that was tactical rather than anything. Any thoughts there, Pom?
Not really. I mean, good argument in chat about the small forwards, I think. Motlop and Durden not really giving us great output. If you watch my preview, we stack them up against good small forwards, and you could see that. I mean, aside from doing this, I mean, like, Brett, I love you, mate, but what you're suggesting is complete madness. It's not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Because Carlton have got to look at, they'll have to facilitate a trade for Dow. If you suddenly play him small forward, he hasn't got any nous for it. Do you know what I mean? That's it. From stoppages, yes. But what they're going to do, and the only small forward there is 20% of the game, which is 8 tackles. And to be fair, Durden and Motlop have been producing the output on tackles. It's not goals. So, like, you're starting to see the benefits of poor list management, really, that Carlton don't have the cattle. Josh Honey, this week in the VFL, probably the worst game I've seen. Like, worst game I've seen. Do you know what I mean? Like, worst game I've seen from him. It actually kills me. And, like, rocking clips, like, to be honest with you, in the VFL, no chance at the moment. There is, like, I'd love to sit here and say there is a small forward that's gonna kill it. And, like, the facts are, we are round 11 this year, and people wanting to reinvent the wheel. But I would suggest the reason that we are so lack of depth is because Carlton keep trying to change the mold. Change the mold. Do you know what I mean? Change the mold. And instead of actually sticking to something. So unfortunately, this is where we are. Do you know what I mean? This is where we are. And at the moment, there isn't a plethora of small forwards. And the statistics do show it takes them a couple of years. But the problem is, he's doing his job. The other two aren't. So it's going to be an interesting one. But moving on, because we have to finish. What is our predictions, ladies and gentlemen? I want some predictions, and I want which small forward is going to kick me more than 3 goals, and we'll stick some money on it and maybe do some charity giveaway. I don't know.
Tom Papley. Oh, for Carlton. Which one's going to kick 3 goals? I mean, you'd be daft if you didn't go with Matt Owies. He's the only one who seems to be capable of hitting the scoreboard. I mean, I'm going to back us in this one, given the limitations Sydney have had with their list recently. They just scraped over the line because North Melbourne did maybe the best example of tanking I've seen in modern sports history. Just beautiful work from North to make sure they got the win but didn't get the win there. Sydney are not playing well at home. They're better. They smashed us in the preseason, but I will, like a fool, back us in again to win. I'm going to back us in to win by 24. I think the reins are going to come off a little bit. I think we're going to score 100 points for the game, which I feel like we haven't done in a long time. And while you talk, Pom, I'm going to look up the last time we scored 100 points.
It's going to be an interesting one. A lot of Motlop or Owies, a lot of Owies. I think that's the safe one.
Aside from West Coast Eagles, we beat North. We scored 100 points. And then before, if you don't want to count North, because they're spuds as well, we scored 100 points last in round 20, 2021. So I think we're going to rectify that this week.
I'm going to say I like this from Shane. Shane's on the right path here. I like this. I'm going to give Motlop the benefit of the doubt. I think Motlop's going to kick 3. Motlop's going to be our small this week. And I think Carlton by 15. I think by 15. But we will find out. Chat, make sure you scream and shout. There's been a lot of people throwing shit at the cheer squad. Now, I know my chat is better than that because I know you guys aren't stupid. You know it's not the responsibility of 50 people that volunteer their time to be the noise for all of you. So I want to have a collective agreement. Wherever you are in the world, if you are a blue bagger, it is your duty to cheer, scream, and enjoy it, right? It's not the cheer squad's fault, Carlton lose. It's fucking not mine. It's not Terry. People donate their time. So they deserve an element of respect for doing that. But it's your responsibility as a fan to get up and about and create energy. So I don't care if you are in the cheer squad, you're 3 years old going with your pop, you're going with your nan, you're going with your mum. Make some fucking noise at home. Annoy the wife, annoy your husband, annoy your kids, right? Everyone needs to get a collective effort to give them some energies because at the moment, they're struggling. Let's be honest. The team are struggling. So we can be disappointed. We can criticize them. But on game day, we always fucking cheer and we back them in because that is what makes them a good side. That is what makes them a good side. That helps. Imagine doing something and someone telling you that you're a tit all the time. You need some of that love, that positive reinforcement. And then end of the game, we debrief it. We get frustrated. We get upset. But then we do it next week, the week after, and the week after. It's what we always do. But remember, just try and be good to each other, chat. I know 90% of you in this chat are really good. Just try and be good to each other because seeing some of the comments I've seen, not from you guys and girls, because you're good, but from the Carlton community aimed at Cheer Squad and certain members of our wonderful fan base, whether I like people or not. Carlton fans are Carlton fans. So let's get around them. Let's enjoy it. Let's have a big, big, big week this week. Because tell you what, don't know about you guys and girls, I'm fucking sick of reviewing losses. Tell you that. Done a few of them. You've only got to go through my history. Done a few fucking losses. Few losses. Yep. I'd do some fucking dubs. Do some dubs for once. They're good. But chat, love you very much. I'll see you tomorrow. 7. I think I'm live 7:30, 7:20. I think that's when I'm live. Around then, 30 minutes before the game.
Close
whenever
enough.
that is. Whenever that is. Come and see me. If you're not here, let's get cheered. Let's go fucking mental. We'll get some songs. Let Dog will be back next week. Look after yourselves. Be kind to each other. Go Blues.